Imagine being born into a family where love isn't shared. It's assigned, like a trophy reserved only for one child. That was my reality. My name is Ethan Miller, and for as long as I can remember, my family's world revolved around one person, my younger brother, Lucas. We grew up in a quiet Midwestern town where everyone thought we were the perfect family. Neighbors admired our tidy yard, Sunday barbecues, and smiling holiday cards. But behind closed doors, the truth was darker. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos. And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation. Be honest. Tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. From the start, Lucas was the golden child. My parents, Donna and Mark, showered him with praise for even the smallest things. His school drawings were framed, his soccer games filmed, his birthday parties grand. Meanwhile, my achievements were brushed aside. If I got an A, my parents barely nodded. If Lucas got a B, they threw him a party. The message was clear. Lucas mattered more. At first, I tried harder. I stayed late at school, joined clubs, and worked relentlessly just to hear, "We're proud of you." But the words never came. What did come were constant comparisons. "Why can't you be more like Lucas? Lucas has natural charm, you just try too hard." Those words carved scars deeper than any wound. I was the invisible son, there but never truly seen. As the years passed, the distance grew. Lucas became bold, entitled, certain the world owed him everything. He was reckless, yet adored. Meanwhile, I learned to survive in silence, burying the anger that grew inside me like a storm cloud. The breaking point came one night during a family dinner. I had been working on a school project for weeks, a business model for a startup. When I tried to share it, my parents barely looked up. "But Lucas," he interrupted, laughing, "that's stupid, Ethan. Nobody would invest in that." My parents laughed with him. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of their favoritism crushing me. That was when something shifted inside. I stopped craving their approval. I stopped trying to win their love. Instead, I began watching, learning. If Lucas was their golden child, I would be the shadow he never saw coming. But revenge takes time. In college, I studied business and finance, determined to build something of my own. I worked long hours, taking on part-time jobs while Lucas coasted through life on connections and charm. Everyone thought I was the quiet one, the weak one. But in reality, I was building weapons of knowledge, tools I would one day use against him. Meanwhile, Lucas wasted no time exploiting every opportunity. He took shortcuts, cheated classmates, and even stole my ideas. One of my early projects, an innovative app design I'd shared with him in trust, suddenly appeared in his portfolio. He pitched it to investors as his own. My parents praised him for being so visionary. That betrayal cut deep. But instead of breaking me, it fueled me. I realized Lucas wasn't just a spoiled brother, he was a thief, a fraud in the making. By the time we both graduated, Lucas had charmed his way into launching a business, funded largely by my parents, money, and their wealthy friends. They bragged about him at every church gathering and dinner party. "Our Lucas is going to be the next great entrepreneur." And me, I was forgotten again. But here's the thing about being overlooked. It gives you freedom. No one notices the quiet one. No one suspects the invisible son. And while they weren't looking, I was preparing. Every fraud Lucas committed, every dirty deal, every shady investor, I started keeping track. This wasn't just about being the neglected son anymore. This was about justice. Because one day, when the time was right, I would make sure the golden boy's empire turned to dust. Lucas's rise was as flashy as it was fast. Within 2 years of graduating, he had turned his startup into a regional business. Investors lined up, media outlets praised him as a visionary, and my parents swelled with pride as if they had raised the next Steve Jobs. But I knew the truth. Behind the glamour, his empire was built on sand. I had proof of it. Contracts altered, employees underpaid, taxes avoided, investors lied too. He wasn't just ambitious. He was reckless, greedy, and careless with people's trust. And worst of all, he was careless with my trust. One night, I discovered something that changed everything. Lucas had stolen another one of my ideas. This time, it wasn't just a college project. It was a fully developed business strategy I'd been nurturing quietly, planning to pitch to a potential investor. I had left my laptop open at our parents' house, and Lucas had copied my files. A month later, I watched him present my exact plan, word for word, to a crowd of applauding businessmen. The rage that burned inside me that night was indescribable. It wasn't just theft, it was erasure. He wasn't just taking my ideas, he was taking my identity, my very place in the world. And my parents, they clapped the loudest. I remember sitting at the dinner table that same week. Lucas was talking about his brilliant strategies, my mother gushing about how proud she was. My father chimed in with, "Lucas is the future of this family." Then he turned to me and said, "Ethan, you should learn from your brother. Maybe you'll catch up one day." Catch up? I was the one paving the road he was walking on. That night I swore to myself, never again. I wouldn't let him steal from me, not my work, not my life, not my dignity. If Lucas wanted to be the star, I'd make sure his light burned so bright it would destroy him. But revenge couldn't come in anger. Revenge required patience, precision, and a mask. So I wore mine well. Whenever I visited home, I played the quiet brother. I congratulated Lucas, smiled politely, and pretended not to care. I let him believe he had broken me. The more invisible I seemed, the less he suspected. And all the while, I kept gathering evidence, contracts, leaked documents, testimonies from disgruntled employees. Lucas was careless, leaving trails everywhere, and I was always there, following in the shadows. Then came the day I realized the depth of his betrayal. Lucas wasn't just stealing ideas or cheating investors, he was exploiting people. Small businesses trusted him with partnerships, only to be crushed under unfair terms. Employees worked overtime without pay, afraid to lose their jobs. Behind every success story of his, there were dozens of ruined lives. And my parents, they didn't want to see it. They were blinded by the shine of his trophies and magazine features. But I saw it. I saw every single victim. And in their pain, I found my purpose. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about justice, for every person Lucas had deceived, manipulated, and destroyed. The opportunity for my plan came sooner than I expected. Lucas was preparing to expand his business nationwide. He was courting new investors, big names with deep pockets. If he succeeded, he would be untouchable. That's when I decided it was time. I began planting seeds, anonymous tips to journalists, quiet conversations with employees, encouraging them to share their experiences. I leaked small but damaging truths, just enough to raise questions, not enough to blow everything up. At first, Lucas brushed it off. He was too arrogant to think anyone could touch him. But slowly, cracks began to show. Investors grew cautious. Rumors started spreading, and I watched from the sidelines, smiling silently as the golden boy's shine began to dim. One evening, Lucas called me unexpectedly. His voice was sharp, irritated. "Ethan, you wouldn't happen to know anything about these leaks, would you?" I almost laughed. He suspected, but he didn't know, not yet. "Leaks, no idea what you're talking about, Lucas," I said calmly. "Maybe people are just jealous of your success." He hesitated, then chuckled. "Yeah, you're probably right. Everyone envies me." That arrogance was his weakness. He couldn't imagine I was capable of outsmarting him. And that's why I would win. But as satisfying as those first cracks were, they weren't enough. Lucas needed to be destroyed completely. His empire couldn't just wobble, it had to collapse publicly, irreversibly. And for that, I needed one final piece of evidence. Something so damning it would not only ruin his business, but strip him of every ounce of credibility. I didn't know what that evidence would be yet, but I knew this: Lucas's greed would eventually hand it to me. All I had to do was wait in the shadows. And when the moment came, I would be ready to strike. Waiting was the hardest part. Every instinct in me screamed to strike, to expose Lucas for the fraud he was, but I knew timing was everything. A premature move would only make me look bitter and jealous. No, I had to wait until the exact moment his empire reached its peak. That way, when it all came crashing down, the fall would be devastating. So I played the long game. I got a stable job in finance, deliberately keeping a low profile. My life looked boring on the outside, quiet apartment, routine workdays, little social life. But under that dull exterior, I was building a war chest of information. Every time I heard about one of Lucas's shady deals, I dug deeper. Every time an employee whispered about unpaid bonuses or forged invoices, I collected proof. Soon I had a folder, no, an arsenal of evidence that could bury him. But I wasn't ready to unleash it yet. I needed to understand his patterns first. Lucas was predictable in his arrogance. Every success made him bolder, every bold move made him sloppier. He couldn't resist cutting corners, couldn't resist the thrill of risk. And sure enough, his next big gamble revealed itself. Lucas wanted to expand internationally. He announced it at a family dinner, beaming as if he had already conquered the world. "This is it," he said, raising a glass of wine. "The Miller name will be global." Our parents nearly cried with pride. My father clapped him on the back, saying, "Son, you're unstoppable." I smiled quietly, playing my role. Nobody noticed the way my eyes lingered on Lucas a little too long. Nobody noticed the gears turning in my mind. Because I knew. International expansion meant bigger risks, bigger lies, and bigger opportunities for me to strike. The first crack came when I met a man named Robert, a mid-level executive who had once worked closely with Lucas. He had been fired after raising concerns about accounting irregularities. "He ruined me," Robert confessed one night over drinks. "I lost my job, my reputation, everything, and the bastard still walks around like a king." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "What if I told you I could bring him down, but I need your help?" Robert looked skeptical at first, but when I showed him some of the files I had collected, emails, contracts, forged signatures, his eyes widened. "You've been keeping all this," he whispered. "For years," I said. "I've been waiting for the right moment, and it's almost here." Robert agreed to cooperate, and with his insider knowledge, my arsenal grew sharper. Meanwhile, Lucas continued basking in his glory. He bought luxury cars, flaunted designer suits, and partied like he was untouchable. Social media loved him, the press adored him, and my parents, well, they practically worshipped him. But behind that shiny image, the foundation of his empire was cracking. Late payments to vendors, lawsuits quietly settled, employees leaving in droves. And I made sure every little fracture was documented. One night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the mountain of evidence spread across my desk. It was enough to ruin him already, but something inside me wanted more. This wasn't just revenge. It was about making him feel what I had felt all those years. Invisible, powerless, discarded. I didn't want him to simply lose money or fame. I wanted him to lose the very thing he valued most, his untouchable reputation. That's when the plan crystallized in my mind. I wouldn't strike from the shadows forever. No, I would let the world see. The same cameras that adored him would capture his downfall. The same investors who worshipped him would abandon him. And the same parents who had chosen him over me would finally see the truth. The universe, it seemed, was on my side. Just as I was finalizing my plan, Lucas made his boldest move yet, securing millions in investment for his international expansion. The investors were high-profile, and the press went wild. But I knew the numbers didn't add up. The projections he showed were inflated, the contracts misleading. One wrong report, one leak, and the entire house of cards would collapse. And I was holding the match. The night before Lucas's big press conference, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, folder in hand, heart pounding with anticipation. Years of anger, betrayal, and neglect had led to this moment. I opened my laptop, typing an anonymous email to a well-respected journalist known for exposing corporate fraud. Attached were dozens of documents, proof of embezzlement, fraud, and deception. My finger hovered over the send button. This was it. Once I clicked, there was no turning back. But as I stood there, a thought struck me. Was I ready for what came after? Lucas wouldn't just fall. My parents, my family name, the entire facade of our perfect family would crumble too. For a brief moment I hesitated. Revenge was sweet, but it was also destructive. Could I handle the fallout? Then I remembered every insult, every ignored achievement, every stolen idea. I remembered the laughter at my expense, the way my parents dismissed me. And with that, I pressed send. The first domino had fallen, and there was no stopping the collapse now. The morning of Lucas's press conference, the headlines broke like a thunderclap. Is Lucas Miller's empire built on lies? Insiders raise questions about shady deals. Whispers of fraud behind the golden boy. The journalist I had sent the files to hadn't held back. He published a blistering exposé, complete with leaked documents, anonymous employee testimonies, and financial records that painted Lucas not as a visionary, but as a fraud. By the time Lucas walked onto the stage, reporters weren't smiling, they were circling like sharks. Cameras flashed, microphones lunged, questions fired. Mr. Miller, can you explain these fraudulent contracts? Is it true you underpaid employees for years? Investors want answers. Are you a scammer? I watched the live stream from my apartment, my heart pounding as Lucas's confident smile faltered. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Sweating, stammering, he tried to laugh it off. This is ridiculous, he said, voice strained. Baseless rumors, jealous competitors, nothing more. But the damage was done. The cracks had become visible, and once people saw them, they couldn't unsee. In the days that followed, the empire began to crumble. One investor pulled out, then another. Lawsuits surfaced, employees came forward, and the press dug deeper. Every skeleton Lucas had tried to bury was being dragged into the light. And through it all, I stayed silent. My parents, however, were anything but. At first, they defended him. My mother insisted Lucas would never do such things. My father claimed, it's all lies. People are trying to bring him down because of his success. But as the evidence piled higher, their voices grew quieter. I could see the cracks forming in their blind faith too. For years, they had chosen Lucas over me. Now they had to face the truth that their golden boy was no saint. One evening, I got a call from Lucas. His voice was panicked, desperate. Ethan, you've seen the news, right? This is insane. They're making me out to be some kind of criminal. You believe me, don't you? I paused, savoring the irony. For years, I had begged for him to believe in me, for my parents to believe in me. And now here he was, begging for my belief. Lucas, I said softly, I think you should tell the truth. There was silence, then his tone sharpened. You think I did this, don't you? You're just like the rest of them. And before I could respond, he hung up. Behind the scenes, I kept fueling the fire. More documents, more tips, more whispers placed in the right ears. The story wasn't just surviving, it was exploding. TV pundits debated it nightly. Social media turned his name into a punchline. Hashtags like Lucas the Liar trended worldwide. And Lucas, he was spiraling. His once carefully curated image, designer suits, confident smirk, polished speeches was falling apart. Paparazzi caught him looking disheveled, screaming at assistants, avoiding cameras. The golden boy was cracking under the weight of his own lies. But I wasn't done. If Lucas was going to fall, I wanted him to fall completely. No chance of recovery. No second act. He had to lose not just his business, but the very thing he cherished most, his legacy. That's when I leaked the final piece, proof of embezzlement. Money taken from investors, funneled into offshore accounts, disguised under shell companies. It was undeniable, irrefutable, and damning. The moment that story hit, it was over. Federal investigators opened a probe. Investors sued. Business partners cut ties. The board of directors forced him out of his own company. And my parents. For the first time in my life, they looked at me differently. Not with disdain, not with indifference, but with something else. Shame. I'll never forget the night my father sat in silence at the dinner table, staring at his hands. Finally, he muttered, "We should have listened to you, Ethan. We should have treated you better." It wasn't an apology, not really. but it was the closest they had ever come. And for me, it was enough for now, equals. Lucas, however, wasn't ready to accept defeat. He went on television insisting he was innocent, blaming fake news and jealous rivals. But his voice shook, his eyes darted. Even his charm couldn't save him this time. The public had turned. The king was dethroned, and nobody wanted to bow anymore. I watched all of it unfold with quiet satisfaction. The empire Lucas had built on lies was collapsing brick by brick, and he didn't even realize the person pulling the strings was the brother he had spent a lifetime mocking. But as sweet as it felt, I knew the war wasn't finished. Lucas was desperate, and desperation makes men dangerous. He wouldn't go down quietly. And when he tried to claw his way back, I'd be waiting in the shadows, ready to strike the final blow. The courthouse steps were swarmed with cameras. Reporters shouted, microphones shoved forward, the air buzzing like a hornet's nest. Lucas Miller, once hailed as a business prodigy, now walked with his head low, his once flawless suit wrinkled, his tie askew. "Mr. Miller, do you have anything to say about the embezzlement charges? Is it true you forged contracts to deceive investors? Are you going to plead guilty?" Lucas's jaw clenched as he pushed through the crowd. His bodyguards tried to shield him, but the flashes, the screams, the chaos, it all pressed in, suffocating. I watched from the opposite side of the street, hidden in the crowd. My heart hammered in my chest, but it wasn't fear, it was vindication. This was the same man who had driven past me in his sports car, laughing. The same man who had taken everything meant for me. And now, the world was finally seeing the truth. He was nothing but a fraud. Inside the courthouse, the tension was palpable. The prosecutor laid out evidence with brutal precision. Offshore accounts, falsified signatures, forged deals. Every document, every testimony, every shred of proof stacked higher and higher against Lucas. Lucas sat at the defense table, his confidence crumbling with each passing hour. His lawyers fought hard, but the evidence was undeniable. At one point, the prosecutor held up a contract. "This signature," she said, her voice sharp, "was forged. Mr. Miller, care to explain why your brother's name appears here when, by all accounts, he never signed it?" The courtroom gasped. Lucas froze, his lips parted, but no words came. My name, my stolen name, right there in black and white. I felt a surge of fire in my chest. The world finally knew not only what he had done to investors, but what he had done to me. That night, I returned home to find my parents sitting in the living room, the TV muted but still flashing Lucas's face on every channel. My mother's eyes were red. My father looked pale, exhausted. "Ethan," my father said quietly, "why didn't you tell us about the contracts, about everything?" I almost laughed. "Would you have listened? All my life you chose him. You believed every word he said while I was invisible." My mother started to protest, but the words died in her throat. She knew it was true. They both did. For the first time, silence worked in my favor. They had no excuses left. Meanwhile, Lucas's world collapsed at lightning speed. The company he once ruled replaced him with a new CEO. Sponsors pulled their deals. Friends vanished. Even his girlfriend left, selling her story to the tabloids about his arrogance and lies. Lucas wasn't just losing money, he was losing everything. But he wasn't ready to surrender. One evening, my phone buzzed. A private number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Ethan," his voice rasped. Not the smooth, cocky tone I was used to, but raw, jagged, desperate. "I know it was you." I froze, my grip tightening on the phone. "You think you're clever," he continued. "Leaking files, feeding the press. You've ruined me, but this isn't over. You're still nothing without me. You'll always be nothing." His words were venom, dripping with the same arrogance he'd carried since we were kids. But this time, I didn't shrink back. "No, Lucas," I said calmly. "I'm not nothing. You just finally lost the power to make me believe that." And I hung up. The trial dragged on for weeks, but the outcome was inevitable. Guilty on multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. Facing years in prison, Lucas's downfall was sealed. The media declared it the fall of the golden boy. Investors called it justice. And my parents, they could barely look at me without the weight of their shame. But I wasn't done. For me, revenge wasn't just about watching Lucas fall. It was about reclaiming everything I had been denied: respect, recognition, dignity. I began to speak out carefully, strategically. Journalists reached out, and for the first time I let them hear my side of the story. Not all the details, never enough to reveal my hand completely, but enough to paint a different picture. Enough for people to see me. One night, after an interview aired where I spoke about being the overlooked brother, I received hundreds of messages. Strangers wrote things like, "You deserved better. Stay strong, you're not invisible anymore. You're the real survivor in this story." And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a shadow. Lucas had spent years stepping on me to rise higher, but now his fall had become my rise. Still, a part of me knew this wasn't the end. Lucas was going to prison, yes, but men like him don't give up so easily. He would claw, scheme, and fight for any scrap of power he could get. And when he did, I'd be ready. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about making sure Lucas never hurt anyone the way he had hurt me. Ever again. The boardroom was silent. The only sound was the ticking of a clock on the wall as Lucas sat slumped in a leather chair, his once pristine suit wrinkled, his face pale. Across from him, Ethan stood tall, calm, and unshaken. For years, he had dreamed of this moment, not out of cruelty, but out of justice. "You took everything from me, Lucas." Ethan's voice was low but steady, cutting through the silence like a blade. "My family's love, my ideas, my dignity, and now you have nothing left." Lucas's eyes darted around the room, searching for allies. But the board members, the same men who once clapped at his speeches, now looked at him with disdain. Investors had pulled out, government auditors were circling, and the media swarmed outside the building like vultures. The empire Lucas had stolen brick by brick was collapsing in real time. "You think you've won?" Lucas muttered, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and despair. "But you're still the forgotten one. Mom and Dad will never see you as their son. You'll always be in my shadow." Ethan stepped closer, his eyes sharp. "I don't need their approval anymore. I built myself without them. What I wanted was the truth, and the world finally sees it." That evening, their parents sat in the living room, the TV blaring headlines about Lucas's downfall. "Fraud scandal rocks business empire." His face flashed across the screen, once a symbol of success, now a mark of shame. Their mother's hands shook as she clutched a tissue. How could this happen? Lucas, our perfect son." Their father turned to Ethan, who stood in the corner, silent but resolute. For the first time in years, the old man's eyes softened, no longer filled with judgment. "Ethan, we were blind. We didn't see you. We didn't see the truth." Ethan's throat tightened, but he forced himself to speak. "All I ever wanted was to be seen, not as perfect, not as special, just as your son. But you made me invisible." Tears welled in his mother's eyes. "We're sorry, Ethan, we were wrong." But Ethan shook his head. "It's too late for sorry. I'm not the same boy who begged for your love. I've learned to live without it. What matters now is that Lucas answers for what he's done." The next day, Ethan met Lucas one last time. The man who once strutted with arrogance now looked like a ghost of himself, beard unkempt, shirt untucked, eyes hollow. "You planned this all along," Lucas whispered bitterly. "You waited for me to fall so you could stand on my grave." Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "No, I waited for the truth to catch up to you. All I did was speed it up." Lucas clenched his fists, his pride refusing to die. "I was the chosen one, you were nothing." Ethan leaned in, his voice ice cold. "And yet here you are, nothing." Lucas's shoulders sagged. For the first time, the mighty brother was powerless. Weeks later, Ethan stood in his modest office. The company he had built from scratch was thriving, not because of greed, but because he treated his employees like family, the kind of family he never had. His success wasn't measured in money or fame, but in respect, loyalty, and peace of mind. One of his colleagues asked, "Don't you regret it, Ethan? The years you lost, the pain you carried?" Ethan smiled faintly. No, every scar shaped me into who I am. Revenge wasn't about destroying Lucas, it was about reclaiming myself. He looked out the window, the city skyline glowing with endless possibilities. For the first time, he felt free. Life had come full circle. Ethan had been the forgotten son, the shadow, the silent outcast. But in the end, he became something greater, a man who refused to be broken, who turned betrayal into strength, and who proved that even the deepest scars can become the sharpest weapons. His parents, now older and humbled, often tried to reconnect. Sometimes Ethan let them in. Sometimes he didn't. But he no longer needed their validation. He had forged his own identity, his own worth. And Lucas, he vanished from the headlines, a fallen star remembered only for his downfall. Ethan didn't rejoice in his brother's misery. He simply let justice run its course. Because true revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about rising so high that their betrayal can no longer reach you.